Radio. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to Dave and Mackie's Shiny Side Out on Revolution Radio. That's right. Here we are. Important message. This is Listener Funded Radio. If you can donate, please do. If you can't tell people about the station, of course, if you can donate, you can also tell people about the station. But just tell people about the station and donate if you can. This is show number 634. 430 and 600. And if my math is correct, that puts us in the 13th year of doing the show. Lucky 13 is what it is. Correct. We, as Dave mentioned before the break, and there's a new show cycle. It's an old show cycle, updated though, of course, which we first shared with you on show 117, and again in show 479, and again now we started last week on show 633. A lot of things have happened in those intervening years, as you all know, and it's interesting when you look at the entire span of our economic life and how things have changed. The rich are getting ever richer, and the middle class is being disenfranchised. Richer. That's right, and the poor don't count anymore, Dave.
No, we're the slave race. That's what we've turned into.
Completely. So look, we talked about the death of capitalism last week and why we think that is, how Mr. Greenspan got it horribly wrong, much to his shock. What did he say? He was shocked, he said. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you know. Shocked.
You weren't shocked when you were making tons of money off it, but now you're going to quit, so I'm shocked.
Yeah, and he's been very distressed as well, he said. He was shocked and distressed.
I feel sorry for him.
Yeah, I wonder how many people he let sleep in his guest room, but got to keep that off the house. I'll venture a number, 0. That's my number, Dave. That's the number I'm putting forward. But this week, we've got something from The Guardian, April 25th, 2019, written by George Monbiot. He's a long-time contributor. Yes, I know The Guardian is left-leaning. I do know this. But last week we shared with you articles from the Fortune magazine, not so left-leaning. All right.
It's funny.
So that happened. And also from the Financial Times, definitely not left-leaning. And they're always saying the same thing. I made a mistake, admits Greenspan. I made a mistake. And this is the one from the headline from magazine. This is an article headline. We may be looking at the end of capitalism. That's April 6, 2023. One of the world's oldest and largest investment banks warns greedflation has gone too far. That is unbelievable. But again, we shared that with you last week. So we're not left or right. We bring you a balanced picture, and they're all saying the same thing. Dave, why don't you tell us what The Guardian had to say, in 2019?
Yeah, better get me quick before my nose goes again. Yeah, all right. I know. But, what's a liter of blood? Who cares?
Yes, sausage.
Why? Maybe I was being a little sympathetic to the news stories that I was talking about. There you go.
Uh-huh.
No, I wanted to maybe feel, I'm a method actor, Mackie. So.
You're an empath. That's what you are.
Empath, that's what I'm doing. So, The Guardian, the headline is, Dare to Declare Capitalism Dead Before It Takes Us All Down With It. This is George Monbiot, Thursday, the 25th of April, 2019. All right, here's the story. For most of my adult life, I've rallied against corporate capitalism, consumer capitalism, and crony capitalism. I remember that term. It took me a long time, he says, to see that the problem is not the adjective, but the noun. Adjective, but the noun. While some people have rejected capitalism gladly and swiftly, I've done so slowly and reluctantly. Part of the reason was that I could see no clear alternative, unlike some anti-capitalists. I have never been an enthusiast for state communism. I was also inhibited by its religious status. To say capitalism is failing in the 21st century is like saying God is dead in the 19th. It is secular blasphemy. It requires a degree of self-confidence I did not possess. But as I've grown older, I've come to recognize two things. First, that it is the system rather than any variant of the system that drives us inexorably towards come on. Pardon me for my French. Becky? Inexorably towards disaster. Second, that you do not have to produce a definitive alternative to say that capitalism is failing. The statement stands on its own right, but also it demands a different effort to develop a new system. Perpetual growth on a finite planet leads inexorably to environmental calamity. Capitalism's failures arise from two of its defining elements. First is perpetual growth. Economic growth is the aggregate effort of the quest to accumulate capital and extract profit. Capitalism collapses without growth, yet perpetual growth on a finite planet leads inexorably to environmental calamity. Those who defend capitalism argue that, as consumption switches from goods to services, economic growth can be decoupled from the use of material resources. Last week a paper in the journal New Political Economy by Jason Hickel and Georgios Kallis examined this premise. They found that while some relative decoupling took place in the 20th century, material resource consumption grew, but not as quickly as economic growth. In the 21st century, there has been some recoupling. Rising resource consumption has so far matched or exceeded the rate of economic growth. The absolute decoupling needed to avert environmental catastrophe, a reduction in mineral resource use, has never been achieved and appears impossible while economic growth continues. Green growth is an illusion. A system based on perpetual growth cannot function without peripheries and externalities. There must always be an extraction zone from which materials are taken without full payment, and a disposal zone where costs are dumped in the form of waste and pollution. As the scale of economic activity increases until capitalism affects everything, from the atmosphere to the deep ocean floor, the entire planet becomes a sacrifice zone. We all inhabit the periphery of the profit-making machine. No one can escape it. This drives us towards cataclysm on a scale that most people have no means of imagining it. The threatened collapse of our life support systems is bigger by far than war, famine, maybe even pestilence or economic crisis, though it is likely to incorporate all four. Societies can recover from these apocalyptic events, but not from the loss of soil, an abundant biosphere, and a habitable climate. Meki.
The second defining element is the bizarre assumption that a person is entitled to as great a share of the world's natural wealth as their money can buy. So this is exactly a good point we've been trying to make on the show for a long time. It is insane to allow a single person to own that much wealth. I mean, this has nothing to do with communism or socialism or communism versus capitalism. It's not that. It's insanity, because somebody has to pay the piper. In order for one person or a group of people to amass that much wealth, and to material goods, even if you want to call it that, but not just that, the power, then others cannot have that. Others must suffer, because we're living in a system of finite, limited resources. It's just the truth. We do. And if somebody, so there's a cake, Dave. Here's your cake. There's the cake. Take the cake. Enjoy the cake.
I've got the cake.
Have the whole cake.
That's a good cake.
Okay, but if you eat the whole cake, there's no cake for anyone else, is there? So
not anymore.
I go, Dave, can I have some cake?
It's gone.
Then, it's trickle down cake. You have the crumbs.
What cake?
Fall off his plate. That is trickle down economics. All the crumbs that are falling off his cake plate is trickle down economics. You can't have.
There's no crumbs. I licked it all up. There's nothing left.
If you're Gina Reinhardt, you would. Whoops. But
good luck with that one.
What you gonna do? Like it's not true. You can't be gotten for defamation if it's true, can you? No, look, it is completely wrong to because the thing is, if you let that go, right? Just let's take it. Oh, sorry, I'm going back to the article in a second.
Take a step back.
If you take it to its final conclusion, and you allow anyone to grab as much as they can possibly grab, because that's what it is. Yeah, anyone can grab as much as they want or can. Then the strongest and most ruthless will grab the most. Now, if that's who you are, and you think you're okay with that, all right. But that's just telling the bullies it's okay. It's okay to be a bully. It's okay to trample on everybody for your gain. Now, it's a model of existence that exists, right? Pardon the double Dutch. But it's not a world I want to live in. Yet here I am living in this world, right?
Oh yeah.
I like. Well,
oh, I'm agreeing with you. Oh yeah.
Oh, I like. Yeah. I like to live in a world where. I'll be honest with you. I like to live in a world where we do look out for each other. I like to live in a world. Give you simple examples. As I'm driving along, and the lane to me is merging into my lane, I make space for the guy in front of me.
Yeah, me too.
Why? Because that's how society works. Because if I, blindly follow my own self-interest and don't let him in, and everybody thinks like I do, then this lane will never move unless he crashes into someone.
And then that's a bad day for all the participants.
That's a bad day, but we understand the zipper principle. People should understand it. So you let the person in. I do expect a wave. Because that's good manners. Or maybe, or maybe you're driving in a street and there's a narrowing in the street where only one car can pass at a time. Mm-hmm. So you stop and you see there's a line building. Okay, this person obviously waited. Now there's maybe 3-4 cars behind that person, so you let those 3, 4, 5 cars go. Yeah, that's right. Wave is nice. But if the first car doesn't wave for me, that's okay, because that person did what I'm just doing. So that's okay. Yeah. Right? But the people afterwards should wave. But that's how human interactions, if we're living in a group, that's how they should work. These are simple examples taken from traffic. It's the same for anything else. If you see somebody arms full of stuff, maybe holding the head of a child, whatever it might be, you should open the door, irrespective if that person is a man or a woman or whatever. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
If you walk around a corner into another alley of a shopping centre, for instance, and it's completely filled from side to side with people attempting to get things off the shelves or moving past, you don't just bluster through pushing them out of the way. That's wrong. Because you would have to then expect other people could do it to you. Yeah? And how are you going to feel about it? Not many people see both of those arguments, and that's why the dash cams Australia is so popular, because of just people being, and I like to refer to them as my father did, pork chops, doing things just for themselves, right?
Yes.
Now, you're absolutely right, Maggie, and the world is here so that we don't collide with each other. When we're walking, we don't intentionally try to bump into people. And financially,
exactly right.
You're absolutely, handing it back to you, financially, isn't that what we should be doing too? I sound like a communist.
No, but see, this is where, okay.
I've been taught, Maggie, that's communist talk.
No, in communism, the means, let's just understand communism just for a second. In communism, and communism only applies to an industrially developed nation. Let's be clear on where communism, or what communism was designed for.
Mm-hmm.
And what communism states very clearly, all the workers should own the means of production. So we should all be invested in the companies we work for. So there shouldn't the relationship shouldn't be owner-employee. We should all be owners of the business. It's communism. Now, there's state communism, which is a different thing again, but communism, all it advocated was that we should all share in the spoils of industry. There shouldn't be a class that exploits the workers, right?
Oh, yeah, there you go.
But rather an equal sharing. And some companies have done this. So believe it or not, Huawei works that way. HP, back in the day, when Hewlett Packard were around, they worked that way.
That's right.
Other companies encourage profit sharing as well in form of bonuses. I think, look, I don't know for certain, but I think ServiceNow might. But companies do. They do that. And that was the fundamental idea of communism. Not state controlled everything. No, not at all. That was only introduced because it couldn't work any other way, because nobody wanted to give up their stuff. So they had to force them to do that. No. The idea was to everybody share in, and not even equally, but according to their effort. I mean, yes, there's then it comes to socialism comes in, where you should look after the people that are not capable to look after themselves. That's not communism, though. Socialism says, hey, look, we should all have a system of health, a system of education, a system of etc., where everybody can participate and everybody has a right to those services, health, education, etc., right? Housing, if you can't afford it. That's socialism. Communism is about sharing the means of production, sharing the profit of the means of production. Okay, that's all it advocated. What we're seeing today as communism is a complete travesty of the actual ideas that these people initially had. So it's not communism per se, David. It's just common sense to want to do these things. Because again, sure, make $100 million. We said this before. Here it is, $100 million. Why do you need $1 billion? Why do you need $100 billion? What are you going to do with that? You know what I mean? I mean, if you're just looking to help people, then hey, let's take the money and help people. But $100 million, if you're very successful or corrupt, I don't care how you got the $100 million. I don't care. I prefer if you got it through hard work, but you probably didn't. But that's it. That's as far as you can go. $100 million. You're now in the elite club of, and it's not parasite, but this is the elite now, right? Because the rest of your cash goes elsewhere. And there you go. Well done. This will
get a letter from the state,
Yes.
Congratulations on your success.
Yes.
You now move aside.
Yeah, you've won capitalism. Good for you.
Yeah, you won. That's right, like Monopoly. Yeah.
Yeah. Now in Monopoly, you don't win until everybody else is bankrupt.
That's correct.
See? So Monopoly is a direct reflection of capitalism. Now ask yourself, do you really want to live in a Monopoly world?
Nope.
Because you can't win. And we are living in a Monopoly world, right? This is the thing. Monopoly is the best training ground from a philosophical point of view to prepare you for life in the world. Because Monopoly reflects life. You cannot win unless everybody else loses. Unless you put a time limit, and then whoever has got the most wins, right? But Monopoly is a zero-sum game. Okay? Zero-sum game meaning there can only be one winner, and if both of you win, then you both lose. That's really what it's teaching you completely. But it's fun to play, and if it were only a game, hurrah! But it's not. You should call it life.
That's the truth.
Not Monopoly. It's life. Let's play some life. Sorry, but let's go back to the text. But I hope you understand where we're going with this here, right? We're not. I mean, I guess in the final analysis, I am a libertarian communist in many ways, because I do believe that people should be rewarded for their work in a fair and equitable manner. And I can't abide parasites. I really cannot. Now, sorry, let me get back to the text. The second defining element, this is where I left off, is the bizarre assumption that a person is entitled to as great a share of the world's natural wealth as their money can buy, or as they can grab. I want to say as they can grab. This seizure of common goods causes three further dislocations. First, the scramble for exclusive control of non-reproducible assets, which implies either violence or legislative truncations of other people's rights. Second, the immiseration of other people by an economy based on looting across space and time. And oh boy, do we have stories there. Third, the translation of economic power into political power as control over essential resources leads to control over the social relations that surround them. That is very true. Economic power. Strom Thurmond, senator, 2001, 2002, 2003 maybe even, said that the Bush Jr. government was the worst form of cash and carry government he had ever seen. There was a direct translation of economic power into political power. Directly. Dick Cheney, a former CEO of Halliburton. No conflict of interest there. Really? Come on, you think we're stupid? In the New York Times on Sunday, which was, of course, the Sunday when the article here was written, the Nobel economist Joseph Stiglitz sought to distinguish between good capitalism, which he called wealth creation, and bad capitalism, which he called wealth grabbing. And that's such as extracting rent, for example. George Monbiot understands this distinction, but from the environmental point of view, wealth creation is wealth grabbing. Economic growth, intrinsically linked to the increasing use of material resources, means seizing natural wealth from both living systems and future generations. To point to such problems is to invite a barrage of accusations, many of which are based on this premise. Capitalism has rescued hundreds of millions of people from poverty. Now you want to impoverish them again. It is true that capitalism and the economy both drives has radically improved the prosperity of vast numbers of people, while simultaneously destroying the prosperity of many others, and I will argue many more others. Those whose land, labor, and resources were seized to fuel growth elsewhere. Much of the wealth of the rich nations today was and is built on slavery and colonial expropriation. Our choice, and I've abridged the text here, so if you want to read the full, there's a link. Our choice comes down to this. Do we stop life to allow capitalism to continue? Or stop capitalism to allow life to continue? So this is a really important. Yeah, but of course. But see, I agree with George here. He makes a really good point. Yes, capitalism, industrialization, and all that has brought a lot of prosperity to a whole bunch of people in Western nations. Now, bear in mind that during industrialization, and I guess the attendant creation of capitalism, more or less, the capitalists, the industrialists, they didn't give the workers the rights. They didn't say to all the workers, oh, you know what, you're working pretty hard, you should only work 5 days a week, and we should pay for your holidays, and we should pay for your sick leave, and we should have like a healthcare plan for you as well, dental plan, and there should be education for your children, and you should live in circumstances that are better than pigs in a pigsty, and all of those wonderful things. And you should also be able to organize yourself in a union, right? None, not one of the industrialists at the time said any of this. In fact, all the things I just described only came about because people fought for it. So capitalism, in and of itself, intrinsic nature is not to make everybody's life better. The intrinsic nature of capitalism is to make the life better of those who can grab most. That's it. Capitalism is not self-regulating. Trickle-down capitalism is mythology. It's up there with Zeus and Athena, okay, and all the other wonderful gods and goddesses that populate the heavens. It's a nonsense. It doesn't exist. The only reason we have these rights today, and again mostly in the Western world, is because our ancestors fought for them. They lost their lives for them. People like to forget that. These industrialists, they did not go and say, yes, you work hard here, 5-day working week, here, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, paid holidays. No. And then, on top of that, this is the most important point. The rise of Western Europe, specifically, and then as a result of the Americas, like North America specifically, obviously, and the US and Canada, was on the back of others, on the back of Asia, on the back of Africa, on the back of South America.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last 500
and on the back
years,
of means that we exploited the dickens out of them.
Oh, absolutely. Over the last 500 years, we ravaged and raped all the resources of those geographies. And it's funny, it's like a north and south split almost, like north-south, right? Mm-hmm. Almost. We completely obliterated some countries. We were brutal. When I say we, I'm talking about the Western world. Right?
That's right.
In suppressing any resistance, in our attempt to extract, well, initially it was gold and timber, spices, and then later it was oil and other minerals and iron and copper, for example. I mean, that came later, but it was gold, spices, things like that, right? And sugar was massive. And we employed slave labor, we enslaved people, we enslaved nations, we destroyed entire cultures. That's the only reason that Western Europe or Western world is more developed, arguably more advanced, and also the only reason that the Catholic Church, and I'm being very specific here, the Catholic Church is as rich and organized as it is. Because this is the funny thing. The Catholic Church is the only religion on the planet, apart from Scientology, that is organized as it is and is as rich as it is. There's no other religion that is as rich as the Catholic Church. Because they were front and center when it came to the pillaging, the looting, and the raping. Front and center. And you just have to go to Vatican City to see the opulence, the wealth. I mean, it boggles the mind. The cultural treasures they've stolen, the books that are lining the shelves of the Vatican Library and the museums and whatnot. I mean, it's unbelievable. And other Christian orders are in this country. The Jewish religion isn't really built that way. There's no head of the Jewish religion. There's no head of Islam. In fact, there's no head. There's the head of Buddhism. There's the head of Hinduism. There's no one that says, yeah, I'm here to represent God, thank you. That is only the Pope. The Pope. Now, there are, of course, cultures that claim that their kings and such, are descended from gods like in Japan and China. Sure enough. I'm not saying that's not the case. I guess Shintoism is a bit like Catholicism in that way that the emperor is in fact the representative of the gods on earth, right? So I guess that's a similarity. But again, Shintoism is nowhere near as rich as Catholicism. That's where we are. It's just unbelievable.
Mackie, I've heard, just to add, I've heard, opinions that Rome's fortune went to the church at the fall of Rome and the rise of Catholicism.
So it's really interesting when you look at it. So there was only the church in the beginning, not Catholic, just the church, right? Then there was a split, I guess, a schism between East Rome and West Rome. So when the Roman Empire sort of fell apart, which it did, let plumb and all that, the Eastern Roman Church was based in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, and the West Roman Church, which is now the Catholic Church, was based on Rome, which was there was East Rome, West Rome. East Rome based on Constantinople, which was now Orthodox. This was the Orthodox Christian religion, which also split again into Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, and all the other Armenian Orthodox, the other Orthodox Church. And there was Catholic. And the Catholic Church remained coherent until Martin Luther, where it split into Protestants and Catholics. And again, in the English, when the king, was it James? I can't remember, one of the kings wasn't allowed to divorce, and he decided, I'm going to start the Church of England. And there was another major rift in the Christian church there, but Catholics have remained Catholics pretty much solid since then. And you're right, they absolutely grabbed all the riches because they were perfectly situated for that, perfectly situated. In fact, Christianity became the state religion on behest of the emperor because he could see the power it had. And it was important to him to consolidate that power. And see, it was all a matter of being ordained by God. I mean, let's discuss this. I mean, how else do you justify being in charge? Are you really that smart? Are you that good? Are you that strong? I mean, why are you in charge? So what you say? Well, God made sure that, I'm in charge because I'm the right guy. And if the church backs you, and mind this is the important thing, David, well, people back then couldn't read.
That's right.
Most of the people after the fall of the empire, right? Most people weren't able to read, but even during empire times, literacy wasn't all that high. So they could just be told. They
That's
could be
what
told
it
anything,
says.
really, because that's what it says. Really? Oh, you're burning hell now? And it was genius. I mean, it became the state religion because it promised afterlife insurance. This is brilliant. So your life now doesn't matter. That's why all the slaves in Rome flocked initially to Christianity. So initially, the Christian religion, when it came into the Roman Empire, was a religion for the slaves because it promised them a better life when they died.
Next time.
That's wonderful.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it did it slightly differently. If you try hard this life, the next life will be great. But if you're, well, that's your fault. It's your fault. Your last life wasn't very good. I mean, it's interesting how a way to control you that way, right?
No, it's certainly
just do what we tell you now.
Slavery, yeah, that's right. In that way.
Oh, it was astounding. But the Christians, as well as the slaves, then they had something to look forward to. That was good. That was a control factor. And they could see, the power even amongst the common people and the stupid. Right? So that the church became this great religion, the Church of Rome, not Catholic, not yet Catholic. Catholic, they were called Catholic after the split with the Lutherans, Protestants, which came sometime after that. And here we are, Dave. Here we are. Look at us. You're right. The Vatican is absolutely the heir to the treasures of the Roman Empire. 100%. Absolutely correct. And now, again, as we discussed before, capitalism is dead. It's dead. Dead as a dodo. The unprecedented bailout of banks in 2008 firmly placed the stone on the banker's mass grave. Yeah, that's my opinion. Now, there's an article here after the one I'm going to share with you now, from Rolling Stone magazine, and it's the best that I could find on the subject matter, right? Rolling Stone magazine. It encompasses most, if not all, of the monies and special considerations that went into the Troubled Asset Relief Program for the United States, TARP. And we're going to focus here on the United States. Now, do bear in mind, though, that this is only looking at the US bailout, the article. But we have a little blurb here for you. Actually, I'll do that, and then you do the article, the $1 trillion bailout. This is not that long. So this is from The Guardian, November 2011. So this is the bailout, or the shape of the bailout for the UK. The Independent Commission on Banking has recommended wholesale reforms of Britain's banking system, with the big banks' high street operations to be ring-fenced. 2000, which raises this question: how much did the bank bailouts actually cost? And how much are they still costing the British public? Fortunately, the National Audit Office has looked into this, with the report out in July this year. Funnily enough, the Americans never did that. It shows the level of financial support given by the government to the banks since 2009. So this in 2 years, so 2009 to 2011. The report tries to make an assessment of how much they still owe us now, the banks, the people that is, after repayments, fees, and interest. Now the headline figure is £456 billion, down from £612 billion in March of 2010. The peak was a mighty, this is just the UK, £1.162 trillion. The total outstanding support is 1% of March's GDP. Now there's an update here I'm going to share with you. This was taken from The Guardian. The update here is from the Wikipedia article on the bank rescue package. The National Audit Office estimated the total guarantees added up to over 1 trillion, like we just said, at peak support. As these guarantees were gradually withdrawn or expired, the outstanding sum under guarantees stood at $14 billion as of March 31st, 2018. Now, this is in the UK. In the US, there was nothing ever withdrawn or expired or paid back. Okay, bear that in mind. Right? And Dave, why don't you tell us about the craziness?
Turns out that $1 trillion bailout was in fact real. A new Washington Post piece fudges the history of the 2008 financial crash, and this was March 18th, 2019. Last summer, says the article, Washington Post fact-checker, columnist Glenn Kessler wrote that the Medicare for all plan favoured by Senator Bernie Sanders would cause providers, in inverted commas, to face an immediate cut of 40% in their payments. The piece was quickly amended to reflect that the cuts only referred to private insurance payments, leaving Medicare recipients untouched. A few days later, Kessler would repeat and later correct again the same error. Now Kessler is fact-checking another statement by Sanders, this one about the financial crisis in South Carolina. Quote, "Not one major Wall Street executive went to jail for destroying our economy in 2008 as a result of their greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior. No, they did not go to jail. They got a $1 trillion bailout." End quote. On the question of whether or not anyone went to jail for crimes related to the crisis, Kessler is right that one executive, Kareem Sarageldin, did get sentenced to 30 months for offences that could be construed as having contributed to the crash. That his case took place in 2013, well after reporters like Gretchen Morgenson, Louise Story, and myself, says the author, made noise about the conspicuous absence of prosecutions. Is beside the point. Sarah Geldin was indeed prosecuted for overvaluing mortgage bonds and though he wasn't one of the important players in the scandal by any stretch, he had a title you could technically call major. Still, Kessler concedes Sanders' overall point is valid, adding, almost 900 executives went to jail for the savings and loan scandal in the 1980s, compared with just one, remember that? One person in the 2008 financial crisis. From there, he asked, but did Wall Street get a $1 trillion bailout? He ends up giving this assertion 2 Pinocchios. How about, in order, his points. The Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP, which is what you call the bailout if you're a Wall Street executive trying to make the bailout seem smaller, involved an initial outlay of $700 billion, which Congress later reduced to $475 billion. The actual ultimate expenditure of TARP was lower than that, at $431 billion. But this won't matter much, as I'll show in a minute. Point 2. Kessler says ProPublica maintains a great tracker on TARP spending and says banks and other financial institutions received $254 billion, mostly to replenish capital. He goes on to say, but many of those banks are not what one would consider Wall Street. Many community banks and credit unions also receive TARP funds. We'll come back to the issue of the bailout recipients not being Wall Street. Point 3, he then adds the automobile bailouts, the bailouts of AIG, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and comes up with a $632 billion sum, still not $1 trillion. He insists this was not just a bailout of big companies because the American people were also helped. If these banks and other financial institutions had collapsed, many companies would have soon followed, leading to massive layoffs, like we're currently seeing. I added that. Lastly, closer to the real point, Kessler disputes the numerous studies showing the real bailout outlay was through the Fed, which Sanders' campaign had said was anywhere from 7.7 trillion, the number Bloomberg used in its coverage of secret Fed lending, to 29 trillion, the number of the Levy Institute at Bard College calculated, including guarantees and other forms of aid. Mekki.
So these numbers, A, when Bernanke said they were wildly inaccurate, and B, because the different expenditures often represented the same loan simply rolled over. And Kessler quotes the early office, loans outstanding for the emergency period peaked at about $1 trillion in late 2008. This would seem to get past the $1 trillion bailout already, but Kessler also wants to argue the issue of whether bailouts were good or bad. That has to do with fact-checking is not clear, but he goes there. The Fed is not really a federal agency, he writes, and insists its bailout facilities made profits and was a social necessity. For instance, he says they unfroze the commercial paper market, pension for meeting liabilities such as workers' payroll. At the end, he says the U.S. economy would have grown. This is basically the history of the bailouts as written in self-congratulatory tomes like Ben Bernanke's The Carriage Tract, revised probably from my Carriage Tract, Timothy Geithner's Stress Test. It's Wall Street's one-sentence summary of the bailouts. They weren't that big, but they were necessary and made a profit. And even though they made us rich again, they were done for you, the ordinary person. Hurrah! I added the hurrah. Let's start with the notion that community banks were also added to the bailout. There were indeed few small banks that participated in the TARP, and in fact they tended to be in the program longer than the supersized banks, mainly because they were able to repay money as quickly. However, Only a section of community banks get into the program. The Treasury Department invested in 700, or about 10% of the industry. About 100% of the biggest banks were bailed out. As Bernanke told the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission of the nation's 13 largest banks, were at the risk of failure within a week or two of the initial bailout period in late September and October 2008. Every single one of these banks took huge bailout payments. As Gretchen Morgenson pointed out when the information about Fed bailout programs first became public, just 6 banks, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley were the recipients of 63% of the Fed's average daily borrowing, representing about $500 billion just for those. Those Fed dollars were doled out through an alphabet soup of different programs: the TAF, the TALF, TSLF, the TOP, the PDCF, the Maiden Lanes, etc. And were used to execute major restructurings of the economy. That put up $30 billion to help change the bulk of the Bear Stearns, or rather the Hulk, helping further by buying bad assets from the dying investment bank. Citigroup was borrowing $100 billion from the Fed at its peak. Morgan Stanley, $107 billion. Fed money was used to broker Bank of America's absorption of Merrill Lynch and help Wells Fargo buy up Wachovia, in addition to other measures. At the end of all the rearranging, the 12 largest banks in the country, yes, of course, which had all contributed massively to the crisis and had a week to live when the crash happened, as Bernanke testified, suddenly controlled 70% of all bank assets in the United States. So let me just say this again. The 12 largest banks in America, which were 1 week from complete failure if it hadn't been bailed out by the United States government, all of them owned, controlled 70% of all bank assets in the United States. What?
Yeah, that's a lot.
No, really? Okay, fine. Let's keep going. This matters in relation to Castor's piece because it had a profound effect. The financial community now knew the government would never let big banks fail. Now those banks had lower borrowing costs than small community banks. That makes sense, right, guys? And girls, listen. We have proven to the world and market that in the United States we will not let those banks fail. No matter what. We will build them up. Now these banks can pretty much do whatever they want. This turned into a so-called implicit guarantee that Bloomberg said was worth $83 billion a year by 2013. Well, even if they fail, we still build them up. The point is, the plan not only didn't really help community banks, it massively accelerated their disenfranchisement, placing them in a separate class from those deemed too big to fail. So the community banks were massively disadvantaged, and I guess the banks that were too big to fail are now in the A-rated grade of the economic achievers, whereas they, of course, were perceived. The independent community bankers of supported the bill introduced by Sherrod Brown, Democrat from Ohio, and David Vitter, a Republican from Louisiana, in 2013 to break up too big to fail banks. That never happened. Kessler spends half his time quibbling over the size of the top, which was really a minor appetizer on the bailout menu. The bailout was not just the government handing bags of money to companies, although it did that too. It was the array of programs designed to help the companies who screwed up the worst to avoid losses, secure new revenue streams, and emerge from the crash not just unscathed, but more powerful than before. Like in their case, kill them, made them stronger. It's true. Whatever didn't kill them, made them stronger. It can count interventions like the 2008 ban on short selling of $700 and financial stocks, which protected justice from legitimate market pressure. This is another important thing here, Dave. Mm-hmm. The companies that were failing, the banks that were failing. Now, short selling means you're betting against the stock. And if those companies fail, you get a huge payout. That's the same thing happened in 9/11 when there were short selling of the affected airlines, right? And they said, the government said, no, can't do that. Sorry, no good. You know, what? So CNBC said that included commercial banks, insurers, and the two remaining big investment banks, Goldman Sachs Group and Morgan Stanley. These two massive investment had to beg the state to save them from short sellers. Let's see. This is okay. You believe in capitalism? Let capitalism do what it does. Does short selling. You want to grab all of it?
I remember watching that, Mickey.
Grab it from Goldman Sachs. Grab it from Morgan Stanley. No, we can't grab from those guys. We can only grab from the people in the street. Goldman shares down 27% after that ban, while Morgan Stanley's jumped 29%. Did Kessler count an increase in market capitalization figures? That's a important question. Did he count the emergency bank charters handed out to Goldman and Morgan Stanley late on Sunday night of September 21st, 2008? The two investment banks were not commercial banks, but obtained late night permission to call themselves bank holding companies. So they would have life-saving access to borrowing at the Fed's discount window and could open doors the following morning. How much would other investment banks pay for the same state of execution? There were many other interventions. The Post likely forgot that on October 6, 2008, the Fed for the first time is paying interest in required reserve balances, a perk that one bank has described as paying banks to be banks. Now, in Australia, you don't have to hold reserves.
That's right.
In Australia, you'll be rewarded by receiving payments if you do. That's like that. This was a obnoxious gift to Wall Street. The whole concept of the bailouts was supposed to be unfreezing the economy and spurring lending. Banks were so strapped for safe income sources they began filling reserve balances at the Fed, hoarding cash in search of those interest payments to no avail. It doesn't help us. In 2000, these banks were only required to keep about $100 billion in reserve, but according to the San Francisco Fed, reserves averaged $1.5 trillion over the first 6 months of that year. There was $1.4 trillion taken out of the economy, so it's not actually happening. Took money out of the economy. How about the administration's early 2010 decision to give Fannie and Freddie an unlimited credit line to buy mortgages? Everyone from Gary Issa to Dennis Kucinich saw through this one. Dave?
Raising the caps allowed two mortgage giants, which Kessler correctly notes had been taken out of the hands of shareholders.
It's going. Raising the caps allowed the two mortgage giants, which, as Kessler correctly had in the hands of shareholders, to be used as backdoor to purchase stock assets at inflated prices. In other words, the government took over Fannie and Freddie and used the duo in a way private shareholders would never have allowed, as a landfill in which banks could dump bad assets at high prices. Think about that for a second. This is just you're giving you more money than so you can register high profit, and the government is going to pay for it all. Thank you very much.
I love the sound of that.
The government's right? Yeah. How about the government's continuing efforts to look the other way, lower standards, so bailout recipients who should have failed mandated stress tests would be allowed to pass, right? So if you they were allowed. Yeah. So the lower standards of the tests just so these people can stay in business. Yeah, capitalism is doing well. Dave.
They're all good signs, Becky. But we've only got 1 minute left.
Well, The article is a little bit longer. Okay, that's no, we won't make it. Maybe one more paragraph. Central banks, the Fed, to drop estimates of capital shortfalls by 20 billion or more after intense lobbying. Lobbying! Citigroup passed one of its early tests when regulators were persuaded to cut billions of an expected hole on its balance sheet based on transactions. Again, how do you price that kind of aid? Now, pending transactions is on Enron's neck back in the day. Pending, like, and it didn't even have to be real, Dave.
No, you know what? It's just money for everyone. That's what it is. Oh, and if you're in the banks at the time, it doesn't matter. Who needs to test people? Anyway, well, let's look. This has been another day that make your shiny side out, and we'll catch you 7 a.m. Tuesday and Thursday for Plato's Cave. That's Eastern Time, US. And in the meantime, until then, stay safe.